May I have a motion to reconvene the public meeting at 8:24 PM?
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We did the pledge and roll call before going to executive session. Are there any committee reports?
Yes, so there was a notification that went out regarding the legislative dinner, which will be a meeting on June 6th. I think it is. Let me just double check that. June 7th, excuse me. And also if there's any nominees for the Eddie Award. I know that Mrs. Mascari had sent out the notifications. I just wanted to mention that from the Rockland County School Board.
Okay. Are there any other committee reports? Hearing none. Is there any discussion regarding the consent agenda? Your changes to the consent agenda, the actual items we can discuss after we have the motion.
Did the agenda, Lonnie, have to get modified at all?
No, we have, well, we have it with the addendum to the superintendent's consent agenda.
Okay.
The agenda itself. So the consent agenda, so the agenda just reads the consent agenda to the superintendent's office. So when I read the motion, I'll ask for the motion with the addendums. So that'll be addressed. All right. Hearing no further comments, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items 6 through 10 and addendum to the superintendent's consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the consent agenda items?
I opposed 8F, the Instrument Lab Corp, but I don't have any issues with any of the other items on the consent agenda.
You said 8F, Christine?
That's correct. Instrument Lab Corp, the payment in lieu of taxes.
That's the pilot program.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so do you want to pull that out then? Because this is the motions for the consent agenda, right? Items 6 through 10 and the addendum to the superintendent's consent agenda. So if you'd like, we can pull that out and vote on that separately. Or when we come to a vote, you could just vote nay on all the items.
No, I have no issues with the others. I would prefer to pull that out if that's possible. And that way my vote shows that I approved all the other items.
All
Thank you.
right. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda item 8F?
Motion.
Second.
Okay. So may I have a vote for consent agenda item 8F? I'll
So
say,
Lonnie, my understanding is that this is a town, based upon the email we received, this is something that the town
So
decides, and this is just a formality?
correct. So basically, a pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes. And if I misspeak, Dr. Pritchard, you can chime in, but basically it's part of the economic development group with the town to entice businesses to move or to expand their business within the town. So as part of the enticement for a business to stay within the town, they develop a period of time, whether it be 10 years or 15 years, where they make a lump sum payment instead of the traditional building assessment and property assessment that is, traditional, so that they basically negotiate a tax break over a period of time. And then once the period of time expires, it resorts back to the regular taxation process, within the town. So it's something that's really, it's negotiated by others, and the district has very little say, about it. The district's not asked to participate in the negotiations. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I mean, based on my understanding, they're actually going to be paying more taxes. And I guess my fear would be is that if it wasn't approved, potentially they could move to another area.
True. Well, true. That's why the economic development group, promotes this, that they want to work with the, either is the businesses coming into the county and the town and the school district, or existing ones to keep them here instead of moving out. So, and to your point, it's to avoid having a vacant piece of land or a vacant property, and to maintain a taxable, property for the town and the school district.
No, Tom, my understanding is they're not going to be paying more, they're going to be paying less. That was-
Typically, the pilot is to pay less. You pay less over the course of time if it's a new business, to get the business established and so forth. And again, it's to entice them to come into the district or the town's limits and establish their business within, I'll say our town, rather than someone else's. Does that answer the questions?
Yes.
The bottom line is they're not going to
Did
be
we
on
freeze?
Are we
for
taking a
period
vote?
of 10 years. So it's a 10-year agreement with the Development Authority. And at such time, when they do go back on the tax rolls, we'll be part of the tax authority. But as of right now, we won't, after this agreement is settled, we'll be entitled to a portion of the proceeds from the pilot, but they won't be on the tax roll. So it really is a formality at this point. So again, I think that it's for the Board of Education that there is this agreement is in place, and that we are part of the taxing authority. Ultimately, we'll be part of the tax authority.
But are we still collecting taxes from them going forward? Are you saying we're collecting zero taxes?
We will just get a portion. Yes, that is correct. Payment in lieu of taxes. So there will be a set payment for a period of 10 years, and we'll get a percentage of that. And it will be less than typically. The incentive there is, as Lonnie has suggested, that the incentive there is to stimulate business investment in the area, creation of jobs, and all those things that fledgling companies pursue when they try to establish a business in the area to eliminate some of those overheads to get them established. But they won't pay taxes. They won't go on the tax rolls until after the pilot is complete. And I don't have the year of that. Yeah, at the end of year 10, and there is, and as I said, they did put a Mark Sharp, who is our attorney, who works for Shaw Carlson, had sent a memorandum, and I suspect it's a confidential memorandum, so I won't go through anything that I consider to be a confidential legal opinion. However, he did include in there a listing of the pilot payments through year 1 through year 10. And I don't necessarily have that exhibit in front of you, but the total payments will be, it looks like roughly 3.9 million for a period of 10 years. Now, I don't know the assessed value of the property, so I can't compare, in terms of what the differential would be between having them on the rolls or not on the rolls. But presumably, if they were on the rolls, they would be paying less. So,
but of the payment in lieu of taxes, Dr. Pritchard, the proportion that the district gets, is it still similar to the proportion the district would get as if it was on the tax roll?
that is correct. So our pro rata share would be the same as it would be, that sort of that pro rata share as it relates to, and it typically we are the major taxing authority. So we would probably have the largest share of all the other jurisdictions, but exactly what that number is, I'm not exactly sure. But yes, we would. That pro rata share would be based on what we would have collected, based on a schedule of tax payments.
So can you just elaborate a little bit? If we're getting, and I'll pick a number, $10,000 in taxes from them now, how much are we getting next year?
We shouldn't be getting taxes from them now. So
At
they're
all?
not at all. No, it's a newly formed business looking to come into the. Again, that's why probably the development authority issued or incentivized them moving here but they're currently not on the roll. So
My understanding. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. My understanding was that it was an expansion to their existing facility.
That was my understanding also.
my apologies. I stand corrected. You are correct.
So we don't know what their current tax basis is, and we don't know if the pilot represents a freeze of their current tax level moving forward, or whether it is a decrease of their current tax level or a slight increase. So let me ask the question: is this time sensitive?
So I'm going to defer to counsel on that. I know Mark Shark had suggested that if we've had additional questions regarding the settlement or the agreement, rather, that we direct them to Mark. What I can do is, if we were to table this, perhaps have Mark come back at our next meeting to answer any questions that we might have regarding, his, because I know he had worked closely with the other attorneys. But I would defer to counsel on this one.
Okay, all right, that's fine. So let me propose a motion to table consent agenda item 8F. And if it warrants a time-sensitive issue, we can convene a special meeting to address it after further discussions with counsel. So can I have a motion to table consent agenda item 8F.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so now if I work backwards up the motions, right? So now can I have a motion for, bear with me, consent agenda items 6 through 10, excluding 8F, and addendum to the superintendent's consent agenda?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And is Ms. Mascara there to catch all this?
I have it, thank you.
Okay. All right, is there any new business? Hearing no new business, can I have a motion to adjourn to a board workshop at 8:40 PM?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So Dr. Pritchard, I turn the workshop over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs and Board of Education. I just want to make sure that at this point, can folks, can you see the, I put up a presentation? Are you able to see that?
No.
Okay. We're just going to help you here. There you go. How's that look, folks?
We got it.
Great. Well, folks, since our last workshop, we've had an opportunity to develop and refine the budget further, considering some of the feedback that we have received from the board and some of the guiding principles that you've given us, or questions and directions that you wanted us to incorporate into the budget. And we feel as if we're comfortable presenting to you this evening the next iteration of our draft of the 2021-2022 proposed budget. Those principles included our ability to allocate resources aligned with district strategic goals. Probably in plain English, the best way to describe that would be, do our expenditures, are they mapped to our long-range goals? And again, in consideration of the pandemic and that we are coming out of the pandemic, what are those issues that are peculiar and unique to operating in this new environment? As always, we intend to commit to preserving our instructional core for all students, which is the engagement of our students in a curriculum that matters by staff who are competent and professional, and also ensuring that each develops mastery within the context of the instructional core. Meeting the evolving needs of our students, again, specific to, in very general terms, looking at social emotional learning, looking at those facets of developmental needs of our students based on the grade level that they happen to be in, and also the engagement of their families in that effort as well. We will continue to develop our master capital plan to enhance the student experience, and that would include adjusting our capital expenditures to reflect, again, those 21st century or current or contemporary learning spaces, as we have done so in the past. Continue to look for multiple funding sources to offset tax burden. We're certainly going to see a few examples of that here this evening as it relates to some of those federal monies that we will be receiving this year in regard to the pandemic from the federal government. And then again, looking to best organize our organizational structures, systems, and processes. We obviously are always looking to become more efficient. You'll see examples of how we have analyzed our schedules, for example, at the high school specifically, to ensure that our master schedules reflect the demographic shifts that we are seeing in our region, and to ensure that, again, we're meeting the needs of our young learners in an effective way. But also beyond that, some of those instructional support systems to include transportation, safety, and also our facilities to ensure that they are safe and comfortable places for our students to engage in the educational process. So just as a refresher, we've organized our strategic plan into the following focus areas, and the cabinet here this evening will each of us will respond to the various resource alignment with respect to our particular areas of responsibility. And now I'll turn it over to Ms. Girandola, who will be taking us through where we're at with regard to the budget development at this point.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? We're going to start with focus area A, curriculum instruction. I'm going to turn over to Dr. Kulak.
Good evening, everyone. So in terms of looking at our budgetary focus for 2021-2022 school year, our focus is really going to be on maintaining, in some cases reintroducing and enhancing programs, enrichment, and extracurricular activities, so that we can really rebuild the momentum we had in years past. And when I talk about momentum, I'm talking about enrollment and really the high level of enthusiasm that we had among students and families that were participating in the program. Some of the things also I'm referring to are things like family math nights, literacy nights, science nights, district-wide maker fair, publishing parties, We the People, multicultural events, all of those things that have helped make this school district the excellent, exceptional place that has been to work and learn. We want to get back to doing some of those things as quickly as possible. The other big piece that we're focused on next year is addressing learning loss in all content areas, as well as addressing the social and emotional needs of our students. My office is working very closely with Dr. Tesick's office and the Office of Pupil Personnel Services, as well as with our school and teacher leaders, to provide a comprehensive summer program this summer in all 4 schools, with an emphasis on an interdisciplinary approach to addressing individual students' needs rather than having single subject programming to address that learning loss. Another area that we're really happy to be continuing with this summer is the budget will support our 6th annual summer STEAM camp. And we are looking to do all of that in person. I know that will make a lot of people very happy. Great suggestion this week about exploring that all in-person option, and I think we're going to get there now with the new guidance. The core curriculum goals, Dr. Pritchard talked about the instructional core. Richard Elmer's instructional core continues to guide us in terms of making sure that we have a highly competent, qualified professional staff. Our teaching force, the training that we provide them and the expertise that they bring to the classroom is key. That we have a meaningful and engaging curriculum, which is the content that we teach, and that we have a personalized plan for students so that we can meet the individual needs of each student and make sure they're reaching their potential. So the core curriculum goals continue to remain to be teaching history and literacy from multiple perspectives, which includes talking about current events and tying them to history. Our focus continues to remain on digital literacy and computer science skills, looking at digital electronics, coding, and robotics, which we begin in kindergarten. And then the four structures that we continue to focus on, which Dr. Pritchard also talked about. One being time, how we use time, schedules. Obviously, in this new world that we're living in, how we're using time is already changed quite a bit, so we keep focusing on that. How we group adults within our schools, how we group students for instruction, and obviously the learning spaces, the learning environments that we provide for our students to learning, and that includes the digital environment. So moving forward into next year, we also have to, I think, rethink how we're providing opportunities for our students to collaborate, to communicate, and to be creative in this new world, because we have social distancing. We've had kids who've been at home, in some cases 100% of the time, and we need to get kids back in a situation where they can really learn how to communicate in this new paradigm, and find new ways to collaborate while maintaining social distancing and safety as the top priority. So it really is a new way that we're looking at instruction for next year, and we're on the verge of bringing all of our students back in. We've done that now by next week for K-5, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to do that for grades 6 to 12. And it is a different structure. It is a different look now than what we've had in the past. And then the last thing I just wanted to talk about was professional development, because that also has changed quite a bit this year. And as we look towards the future, we are no longer going to be in a position to take teachers out of classrooms as much as we have, hire substitute teachers, and do all of the professional development in person that we used to do. The upside to that is that we have built a lot of capacity in this district over the years in two particular areas, one on problem-based learning and interactive classrooms, and two on reading and writing across the grades, particularly with Teachers College. And because we built that capacity, and because we no longer are having consultants come in person, we've been exploring a lot of virtual learning community opportunities for our teachers, partnering with Dr. Lloyd's office, with Dr. Tessick's office, and Mr. Brady's office in technology. We're able to provide a lot of professional development to teachers and staff moving forward using technology, leveraging technology, asynchronous virtual learning communities, and we're able to provide that training for a much lower cost moving forward. And I know that's something that we're always keeping an eye on. And with that, I think that's a good segue to focus area B, which also covers professional development, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Lee.
Good evening, board members. Great to see everybody. Our office is consistently working to recruit, develop, and retain high-quality staff members. And you might recall that last year, in the 2019-2020 school year, we looked to update our recruitment guidelines. And this year, we're actually looking to consult with local partners such as the Lower Hudson Council of School Personnel Administrators, the Rockland County Association of Personnel Administrators, and our own budding Equity Coalition in order to develop new applicant networks. We're trying to expand the pipelines of applicants coming into South Orange. That's an exciting opportunity for us, and we're looking to do that this year and also moving into next year. When we talk about the relationships that our staff members have with one another, we're looking to place an effort on advancing actionable and supportive dialogue between our administrators and staff. Last year, we established attendance reviews, and we also established performance reviews for our staff members. Moving into this year, we placed more of an effort on contact tracing in our office. Moving back into 21-22, we're going to go back to our attendance reviews, which basically puts dialogue between our administrators and our staff members so we can ensure their health and make sure we're helping them along the way. Lastly, we always want to make sure that we're sustaining partnerships with our district units while ensuring the members that they receive the benefits, supports, and responsiveness that drew them to the South Orangetown Central School District. So when we think about this year, we've been helping them to access federal and state benefits related to the coronavirus, while we're also helping them with their regular benefits. We'll continue to be responsive and supportive looking into 21-22. Thank you. And I will now introduce my colleague, Mr. George Brady, our Director of Technology.
Good evening, folks. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to talk a little bit about Focus Area C. As you know, focus primarily on communication and, as we've seen, technology behind the scenes that really supports all the other focus area groups. So for this, as we look to next year, it's really about maintaining all of our instructional technology supports for our students and staff. As you know, the district invested in a number of instructional resources to support hybrid learning during the pandemic. In effect, we actually established a one-to-one program K-8 within a short 2-month period of time. We adopted a number of instructional tools that you've heard about over the year, Schoology, Seesaw, Pear Deck being examples of those. And in addition, we actually doubled, and in some cases tripled, the number of devices we have out there, not just for our students, now that every student has a device of their own, but also we doubled the number of devices our teachers have. They have both a desktop in the classroom, but also a laptop that allows them to be remote in those instances where we may have to quarantine. So really our focus is going to be to continue to provide that high level of support to ensure that those investments that we made as a district continue to benefit our students and staff. The other area I'd like to talk about is, and Dr. Kulat addressed it, was learning loss. It's an area that obviously we're all concerned about. So the district's data office will continue to leverage the systems we currently have in place to help support teachers and administrators as they work with their students with learning loss. In addition, our data coordinator has and will continue to meet with the building data teams to address these learning losses. And then the other big area or high priority as a district, and certainly under my purview, is data privacy and security. We will continue to review our data systems to enhance our cybersecurity preparedness. We'll also look at implementing various aspects of that NIST cybersecurity framework that I've talked about before, as required by EdLaw and Part 121 of the governor's regulations. So thank you. I'd like to turn it over to actually Dr. Tess.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak about Focus Area C, which is really the health and safety and all matters related to pupil personnel services here in South Orangetown. First and foremost, because of the pandemic, we will continue, like we did last summer, to reassess the needs of our families by implementing our trauma-informed re-entry plan, which is detailed for each and every building based upon the needs of their staff and their students. That plan will be literally reinvented over the summer based upon the updates that we see from the assessments of our families. A key component of that is assessing and really addressing the mental health and social emotional needs of our students. So working collaboratively with Dr. Kulak, what we've been doing is looking at our summer programs, not just for learning loss, but for areas to support students with high anxiety for returning. So we use this idea of a step-up program, which is little by little getting kids to re-enter the building, to build up their confidence in themselves, in the safety of our building, and getting themselves acclimated to being part of our community again. So we will include that, as Brian said, in an interdisciplinary approach when appropriate for our students who may suffer from anxiety, having been 100% remote or hybrid throughout this year. And that will be part of our summer program. In addition to that, this budget allows us to preserve and to some ways shift any supports that we need based upon that new assessment. So all of our buildings will maintain their current staffing and their PPS teams. And I'm happy to say that we've all shifted, all of the buildings have shifted to have 4 what we call school support teams. Very different than the child study teams, which will also still function for the purposes of special really does meet to address the needs of any student or family that may go through a difficult time, whether it was the loss of a family or loved one or a divorce. We really literally go to a case management style for that family for the time period that they are needed. And if necessary, that same person will work with my office and or the community partners that we have to support that family as a whole unit to make sure that their needs are being addressed during that period of time. We are excited and grateful that we are also able to establish a prevention center working with Jack Rallo and the team, and of course with you as the board and this cabinet. That is probably one of the most important points of next year's budget is that we literally have now established a place at the high school for students to go, student-centered place where they can go seek out help. We are working on the dynamics of how we want students to be greeted, when they enter, how we will do assessments, who's going to be doing that. Simultaneously, we're also talking about building a very similar model. In years past, we've used learning centers, which is a place where a student can go to get help. We're currently looking at using space differently, to Brian's point before, Dr. Kula's point before, so that we can have an area. We know that there will be moments where learning loss may, especially at the high school level, may just pop up. Maybe there was a key unit that I missed in mathematics that now is bridging or hindering my bridging to the next unit. We'll have a space where students can literally walk in and sign up to meet with a tutor, and or if they need assistance scheduling office hours or need additional time on campus. So we're arranging for that through Principal Arietta and the administrative team and staff there. So that's an exciting opportunity to make sure, especially at the high school level, where students may have learning gaps that will impede their ability to earn credits in the future, that we're addressing that. And a big piece of the summer program deals with credit recovery, and that'll be important to address for our high school students. Based upon the needs assessments that will occur over the summer, again, by each of the PPS teams for the building, the Family Engagement Center will continue to not only offer what we offered this year, but as you know, we adjusted what we needed to do to that Family Engagement Center to support our staff, who are also parents in our district, as well as our families in the food pantry. So whether or not we will continue with the food pantry depends upon the needs of our students. What we are happy to say is that through the opening of our K-5 program, our daycare is no longer needed, and we're literally able to shut it down as of next week. And we're grateful to Ms. Walker and everybody there, and I hope we never have to open it again. I hope our kids can stay in in-person training. But that's the type of thing that we're ready to do, and it is really the flexibility and the resources provided by this budget, and continually through the board's support of the work of this district to really be flexible and do what we need to do through the pandemic that will position us very well to support students and families as we reopen in the fall. And then I'll turn it over to Mr. Andola for Focus Area 8.
Thank you. So Focus Area 8, financial management of the district, is really meant to meet the objectives and mission of the district through supporting focus areas A, B, C, and D, while also being fiscally responsible. That budget has been developed to assist in that process. And that I'm going to shift over to staffing. And we're going to talk a little bit about the impacts or the implications that are included in this budget. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Lloyd.
Great, thank you. Based on declining student enrollment, particularly at the secondary level, we have proposed reduction, specifically several positional abolishments in the areas of English, mathematics, music, and social studies, and also reduction in positions through attrition, which would be through resignations or retirements in the areas of art and physical education. We've also been able to find some efficiencies in the areas, specifically in the clerical and school health clerk, which we think we could support areas with perhaps less positions in those areas. And then we've made several shifts based on student needs, in particular with an additional E&L position that's internally going to move to the high school. nursing that will support Dr. Kessick's office, and then reading and special education positions that will support our middle school for student needs.
Now we're going to move into budget. We're going to look at some figures and how the revenue, expense, and the fund balance projections that are included in this budget, as well as the tax levy we will look at as well. So here's our revenue picture for the 21-22 school year. We're looking at a budget of $98,208,170. As you can see, the primary source of that budget is coming from our real property taxes. That is the majority of our revenue. We also continue to generate revenue through use of money and property as well. There's our state aid, which we've got some breaking news that we will kind of include towards the end of this presentation. It's good news. It's good breaking news that we will include towards the end of this presentation, towards the end of the budget number presentation. As we move into our expense picture, you can see that I've kind of broken it down into our key areas. Again, where's the support going to fall within the budget? Our instruction, employee benefits, transportation, debt service, and our interfund transfers. We deliver this quality program mostly through the use of our staff. So that is evident in the numbers that we see here. Now, this is our anticipated fund balance at the end of this year. Again, a little bit based on our breaking news, and we're continuing to look at how our revenue and expenditure picture is evolving as we are making adjustments during this school year, and how that is going to impact our fund balance as well. Now, this is actually over the tax levy cap is included over 2 slides because it was just a little too large to put onto one. So the driving factors of the tax levy cap always begin with the prior year actual school tax levy. So that is always our starting base. Our tax-based growth factor is set by New York State real property tax. So that is the 1.0036 number that you see there. Our prior year pilots, you can see in the previous year, they're a reduction and they're added back in the following year. Same thing with our carry forward of building and transportation aid and debt service. Now, a large driving force of this year's tax levy cap was the allowable levy growth factor, which was confirmed by New York State Consumer, which is also known as our Consumer Price Index, or CPI, was 1.23. So you can see last year's was 1.81. It took a significant drop from last year to this year. So it brings our tax levy limit percentage before we get to our allowable exclusions to 1.61%. Now, if I continue with our exclusions, right, again, there is the previous years coming through. The building and transportation aid, those are our best estimate at this point in time based from state aid project amortization reports. And you can see that our debt service reserve, it took a little, the main drop there is due to the pool being closed during this school year. Our exclusion of $2,117,104, that's our $2 million capital, as well as the BOCES capital of $117,104, which brings our maximum allowable tax levy plus exclusions to $83,676,185. The dollar increase from last year to this year is $81,921, and percentage-wise, it It is a 0.1% increase from the previous year. I thought it would be good to look at what our 7-year average increase was, just for you to get an idea of how it can fluctuate as a result of being driven by so many factors. Now, this is our breaking news. This was just released late Tuesday evening. This is the third round of stimulus, which is known as the American Rescue Act. Our share is this $1,231,562 that will come to South Orangetown in the form of a grant. So there will be an application process, and there are areas where the money that the money can be used for, with some caveats of at least 20% of those funds have to be used specifically to address learning loss. The remaining amount can be used for cleaning supplies, educational technology, mental health services, summer or after-school programs, school building improvements that reduce risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental health hazards, implementation of public health guidance, any other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation of and continuity of services and continuing to employ staff. Activities to address the unique needs of low-income children or students, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and foster care users. So that is what this new money will be allowed to be used for through a grant application process. That brings us to any questions or feedback.
So I think that because this is a workshop model, and again, we've provided you with some new information today, particularly a couple of salient points in summary. First of all, thank you, Mr. Nolan. Thank you, team, for this really informative presentation. But a couple of, in summary, it appears that some of those basic numbers that I think would be relevant or salient to the Board of Education are centered on one. We're continuing to grow our fund balance, even though we are experiencing some pressures, some cost pressures associated with the pandemic, and also the general decline in CPI. We've managed to manage those costs vis-a-vis some efficiencies that we've seen in scheduling, but also focusing on those programming aspects that are most important to our students and their well-being, as addressed by Dr. Kulat and also by Dr. Tessick. So that's important to note. But I think what I see as being the most exceptional item in terms of data that was presented here tonight was that very low tax cap. And I think that these are discussions that boards of education across the county and probably across the state are dealing with this week as they go through this next round of budget development. That a tax levy cap that we have not seen, certainly a historic low tax levy cap. So at this point, I think it would be most beneficial, and again, I'm just speaking in general terms right now, but I think we as a cabinet would be very interested to learn from you as the Board of Education. What are your questions as it relates to this spending plan, and what additional advice or guidance would you care to provide for us this evening as we move forward? I also want to say, before I turn it over to the board comments and questions, one, we were particularly careful as we were going through the budget, and we provided you with a draft of that. But looking at those out years, some of those reductions in staff and cost containment measures were designed to eliminate any out-year spending deficits. So again, in addition to preserving the fiscal stability and solvency of our district as it relates to a reserve strategy or a fund balance strategy, we're also looking at ensuring that we're not seeing those red numbers in years out. So, and again, that's largely centered on efficiencies that we've gained in, looking at master schedule at our high school. Because I think one of the questions that Dr. Stepanian had suggested in last workshop was her concern, and I'm hoping I'm going to get this right, Kara, which was when we look at staffing cuts, oftentimes that translates out into the possibility of increased class sizes. I can assure you that that's not what we're looking at. When we look at those elementary positions, we will continue to manage those historic standards of low class sizes at our K through 5, K through 8. But again, those efficiencies that we're looking at really are centered on programming at the high school level, where we may be looking at offering electives every other year, but also just smart scheduling at the secondary level, where we're looking at meeting the demands of students that we currently have currently in our current student body. I don't know if Dr. Kula, I know you wanted to maybe talk a little bit about that. You had some comments about the high school master schedule.
Yeah, so just along the same lines of what Dr. Pritchard's talking about, it really is multiple years of enrollment decline at the secondary level. If you took a look at a 10-year demography report that we've looked at in the past, sometimes if you have an enrollment drop of 35 kids across 4 grades, there's not really any ability to find efficiency. But what we've been doing as a team is looking over multiple years, and we have an opportunity at the high school along the lines of what Dr. Tessick was talking about, and rethinking about how we're meeting kids' individual needs in a more holistic way, so that there will be a prevention center where kids can go and get help with anything that they need in terms of the subject area, in terms of social emotional needs. At the same time, Dr. Pritchard talked about the idea of offering electives potentially not every year. And we used a couple of examples where we look back historically to see that if I'm an incoming freshman, and I know I want to take, and I'll just use aerospace engineering as an example in my project lead the way sequence. If I know that it's going to be offered when I'm a 10th grader and 12th grader ahead of time, and it might not be offered when I'm in 9th grade and 11th grade, we can then run the course every 2 years, have a class size of 15 students, which is really what we need minimally to run it in a financially responsible way, and still meet the needs of all of our high school students. But that requires pre-planning. So that's what Dr. Pritchard was alluding to as far as the possibility of running electives on more of a 2-year cycle instead of having to run every single elective every single year. So I hope that clarifies a little bit.
And I also want to acknowledge Mr. Henry's comment last workshop as it related to perhaps I'm going to use the term overstaffing or excessive FTEs. Again, I think it's much simpler to create a master schedule at the K through 8 level or K through 5 specifically because, it's pretty much a direct reflection of enrollments. We can take a look at the number of students. We want to ensure that we have class sizes of approximately 22. We know how many teachers K through 5 we would need to staff that. However, when it comes to things like electives and student choice, it's a little bit more there's a lot more variability at the high school level. So that's why you see some of those cuts at the high school level as they relate to some of those staffing cuts. We're hoping to get most of those through attrition, but we're really right sizing. And that right sizing process doesn't happen as quickly as it does, let's say, at the elementary level, where it's much easier to make those shifts, make those adjustments. It may take a period of a year or two to get to a point, let's say at our high school level, to determine how to make those adjustments. We think that we're at a point now where we really have achieved a high school master schedule that does not have what I would consider to be an excessive amount of FTEs. If anything, we did produce a draft budget, I want to say it was a week ago, where we may have made too many staff cuts. We were aware of that. We realized that at the middle school and the high school level, we may have gone too deep. So the staffing picture that we're showing you today, we actually were able to restore a few FTEs. I know Dr. Tessick had worked very closely with the principal at the high school and the middle school to make sure that they could actually run their schedules because we wanted to make sure that we had enough capacity, at least from a labor perspective, to make sure that we had the staff available to ensure that the students' needs were being met and that we could actually run the schedule accordingly. But again, we don't have a lot of excess capacity in our staffing picture this year. Maybe in years past we might have, because again we were attempting to right size the master schedule over time. But I think we are at a point now where we can truly say that there's nothing in this budget now that I would consider to be extraneous rather. That we really are looking at a very efficient schedule. Again, so I don't know if Dr. Tessick wants to comment
I
a
would
little bit
just
on
add
that.
that absolutely everything was said that needs to be said. The piece I would add is that we're also taking advantage of some very smart hiring that this district has done through the years. We're hiring duly certified teachers. So what was nice is when we started to really restore our positions back, because we have people who are duly certified, meaning that they're certified in special education and math, or special education and social studies, or math and business, we were able to really find efficiencies within. And so I think that's what resulted in the shifting for the staff, where we didn't need to go out and hire because we've hired well. And we continue to do that, and we continue to build the workforce, in a way that really meets the needs of the students, not just academically, but also social emotionally. And so I think that by doing that, I think what you'll see is people have really, all of the extra certs and pieces that they've worked hard to earn are now coming to benefit them in the workplace and, more importantly, benefit our students.
So with that, I'll open up to questions. It looks like Mr. Lamadrid, your hand is up, and we're at your.
Before says Lonnie, how do you want to handle questions, Lon? Sorry, Lonnie, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, what I wanted to say was that, many of the board members look like dropped their video because we're having some problems hearing you. So if any board member asks a question that you or your cabinet feel you already addressed, please forgive us because of the difficulty we've had with the audio connection here. So I just wanted to preface it with that, Mr. Lamadrid.
If I can start, my question, I think staffing is, continuing on the points made. I understand and appreciate the shifting that was done. From what we see in the presentation, though, it looks like the reductions are heavily focused in instructional areas, though. And couple things I think also earlier in the presentation, it showed general support is still over 10% of the budget. So can you talk about what actions are being done in this budget to reduce general non-instructional costs, staffing and non-staffing? Because just to see the number, without benefits at I think 10.3% is concerning.
All right, so okay, so let's see. What in our budget presentation, Mr. Lamadrid, what I think would be helpful would be to show a comparison between three-part. So a year-to-year shift between the 2021-22. This, the projected budget versus last year. So in terms of percentage.
But in addition to a percentage comparison, can you talk to what cost reduction efforts in non-instructional areas, particularly we've taken, and then mindful of the format, I'd also open up, are there additional opportunities to reduce the G&A side of the budget?
Just further to Dan's question or comment, can we also just verify the numbers in the pie chart versus the numbers in the table? Because it looks like the general support is even higher in the pie chart.
Yeah, so
on that one, the table is correct. Like the table is the correct on the general fund appropriations. So if the numbers are up on the pie chart, it would be the table that's on it. So your table is your correct values. The thing I think of is when you cut and paste and if you make it larger, maybe it drag the line, you shift it, adjust in the graph, but it would not change it on the chart.
okay, so
Which I just know we were working on this. We tried to get it so it was larger for the board to see or the community to see. And my gut is when somebody grabbed it to do it, it shifted it. It changed on the pie chart. So in Excel, if you drag a pie chart slice, it actually creates it bigger, but it won't allow it over 100%. So that was a human error on copying and pasting and shifting to try to make it larger. The
Wait. Whatever it is, let's just correct it before we publish this for the public.
Absolutely.
But I think Dan's question, to summarize Dan's question, what are we doing to, look for cost efficiencies as it relates to some of those to overhead, non-instructional overhead? And I don't, please.
No, I was going to say, we are still continuing to review these figures. As I said, we did get state aid projections very late Tuesday evening. So we will be going through these to look for further areas of improvement based on the information that we received late Tuesday evening.
Yeah.
So we will continue to analyze and identify where we could, reduce in our general support area and ensure that monies are going towards programs that will directly impact our students.
Appreciate that. So I would, and this is a workshop, and this is a draft, right? Iterative process that we've been going through.
Right.
I would ask the district. We've emphasized a meaningful number of instructional roles being eliminated. Part of it is just enrollment declines and changes in the schedule, which I get, and it happens every year. I would though challenge a team though to then go back and say, okay, where have we really looked at all the efficiencies in the non-instructional side to make sure that we're not, because to me, I would think we'd be investing more on the instructional side, especially given the year we had and everything else going on. I'd want to know personally that we really took a hard look at the general support areas before moving ahead with this many FTE reductions. And it may still be, it may very well be the right changes, but I just want to make sure that we've gone through that process and truly scrub the G&A side of this, and that'd be a discussion. Maybe it's a separate discussion. I think we're meeting next week. How do we drill into G&A in much more detail?
And I would even go so far as to say we could look at those, and I like the categorically. I like this particular slide as it relates to those categories: general support, transportation, employee benefits, debt service. Those are all areas that I think we could come up with strategies for. Debt service, interest rates, cost of capital, benefits, looking to shop those benefits, et cetera. Transportation costs, again, we're contractually obliged, but again, there's always room and opportunity to do better there. So
And I would challenge us to benchmark ourselves, right? Because 10.3%, right? Depending on what industry, whatever, 10%, has always been a cautious area. We're over 10%. I would challenge us to say, well, if you dive deeper into the general support area, it's built up in payroll and non-payroll costs. So it's not just a payroll discussion. But then I would challenge us to think about those in areas where we have invested in general support in the past, and the board has shared every year in budget, right? We shouldn't just be rolling over investments that we've made. We should really be asking ourselves, right, are these the right dollars we should be deploying, again, versus other changes or investments we could be making in the budget. So we don't have to get to the bottom of that today, but I would challenge it. Appreciate your from iteration to iteration the work you're doing on the headcount reductions, but I would challenge you to see if there's more work to be done on the general support side.
I think we probably, if we needed to go back through this, I think looking at what the assumptions we had made in terms of, what went in, what were the underlying, how did we come up with those numbers in terms of when we forecasted those appropriations, those estimates as part of the budget? I think a lot of those may have been tied to how we've done those cost projections in the past, but again, these are projections, probably based on economic factors such as CPI, et cetera. So again, I think there's probably room to refine those projections and see where we can do a better job of possibly making sure that those projections are as accurate as possible. So we can, again, continue to drive those dollars back to instruction. So again, we'll take another look at those.
While we're on this slide, I just want to ask the question with regard to employee benefits and transportation. What kind of risk and exposure do we have on these two line items in terms of budget? Based upon my thoughts is with transportation, we're hearing the cost of fuel is going up. So when I hear the cost of fuel is going up, my question is, how's that going to affect our transportation budget line? And then with the employee benefits, with the current pandemic and the various insurance companies, claims and exposure on the pandemic, typically when the insurance companies experience risk, they turn around and they increase your premiums. So I just question, these two items in terms of what kind of potential risk and exposure there may be on these items as we start, finalizing the budget as well.
In terms of the transportation, we have contracts in place that are renewable based on CPI or 2%, whichever is lower. So our contracts will roll forward based on those indices, one or the other. The only thing that could really drastically impact that transportation was if we were to have increased transportation needs. And or if we had to start a new bid process, because I believe we've been rolling our transportation contracts for about 10 years. So it's just that price from 10 years ago, and it's only been going up incrementally based off of CPI or 2%. But again, we are watching that. In terms of employee benefits, I had the same concern while working through these employee benefits. And some of our benefits run on a calendar year. Some of our benefits run alongside our calendar year benefits, I already know what 6 months of the budget will definitively be. So I took a pretty conservative approach to projecting the remaining 6 months of those benefits, and that's for the health benefits, which is the largest cost within those employee benefits. But for instance, I did today, for example, we did get a rate for our dental increase, which was a little bit higher than what I had built into this budget. So thankfully, we're still working through these numbers, and I will continue to analyze and ensure that we're getting them as accurate as possible and that there are no surprises for either transportation or employee benefits.
So what I hear is you're trying to drill down and reduce the number of unknowns that we have within the budget.
Right, exactly. Line by line. And there are many lines, but line by line.
And that's why we have more than one workshop.
Right. And just to piggyback on the question before, in terms of general support, while we were putting this budget together with our vision in mind of what next year was going to look like, right? That was working for a budget. In terms of finding out now our American Rescue Act dollars, we may be able to move some of those out of our general budget into that fund. We may be able to, we just haven't had the opportunity to review that yet.
Great point. And if I can, just reflecting on my comments, I wasn't targeting payroll and general support. I was looking at how do we drive general support costs down, right? Or make sure we have opportunities there, right? So perfect. And that's one way. Right? So that could be interesting. Thank you.
So going back to the student support and the curriculum, I heard what we're doing with regard to, learning loss and the summer work, which is all, great concepts and great ideas and great programs. But I also question, I also should say that I also heard we were discussing the self-confidence of the students in terms of coming back to class. And I think during the last workshop, I made the comment that, the students, traditionally have a hard time Labor Day weekend knowing what comes after Labor Day weekend when they had the 10 weeks off for the summer. And now, although we've been fortunate where we've had the hybrid situation and we've had the students, in the buildings, but not on a regular basis, that, that stress at the end of the summer will be that much more significant. So again, I believe I heard that we're trying to address that with the students, and I would hope we'd also address that with our staff as well. But one of the things I didn't hear, and again, I apologize if I didn't hear it because of the audio quality. And again, I turned off my video to try and increase the bandwidth to resolve the issue. So I apologize for not having my video on. But with regard to our students that are looking at post-secondary life, whether it be in a collegiate and university environment or whether it be in the workforce, how are we trying to support those students that are trying to decide what's next in life and are facing the challenges that either school districts or universities are closed campus, so they can't go visit the campuses, and we all know how important the flavor of a campus and the environment of a campus is in terms of helping students make decisions, and students that want to go off into the work world, how going off into the work world isn't what it's traditionally been. Interviews are now being done through Zoom, and trainings being done through Zoom, which they're accustomed to, but now they're trying to learn the life of the workforce through a computer screen. So I just question, how we're trying to support those students within this budget that, they're being addressed as well. Those needs and those aspects are being addressed as well. As well as the planning for it all.
So I'll share a little bit, that is a concern, right? I mean, the whole college process is difficult for the kids to sometimes navigate with the parents. And we were just talking about this as colleagues and friends prior to the meeting about even for our own families and children, the nuances of the college process is different. So what is in this program is this idea of these interdisciplinary types of courses where they're your non-traditionals, right? So this idea of, we know that we had students struggling with picking colleges in their junior year to even start investigating it. So we're working with the high school to develop their summer course programs or after school programs, or even what we're going to call seminars throughout the fall season to help ramp that up in the sense of naviance, in the sense of interstalizers, and really getting students back on track by holding their hand, because they're going to need that, because we've lost some footwork with many of the students who are doing that. With regard to career readiness, one of the pieces that remains active through this, although not to the level that I would have liked it in second year. You can recall 2 years ago, the Family Engagement Center launched a mentor program, and we had a pool of candidates, many of whom, when we reached out this year, was like, Dr. Chastik, I can't breathe, right? My kids are home with me. I just can't find time. But we did have a full stay. Literally, I had the opportunity. I wanted to observe it because the mentor had asked me for feedback. So I sat with one of our students who was interested in becoming a phlebotomist. And I sat with the mentor who had signed up, and that student and their guidance counselor. And it was through Zoom because she was at the hospital, the mentor. And we did have this candid conversation about what pathways can I get there? What other things should I be considering? What type of personality do I need to be a phlebotomist in a hospital versus a blood bank versus, well, why, and we've worked with our mentors to kind of ramp up their conversations as well, with a commitment that, of course, if at any point the mentor and the student could come together and meet safely through the new CDC guidelines, we would arrange for that. And we're going to continue to do that. The mentors are little by little reaching back out to say, hey, do you want anybody? Do you have anybody? And we're starting to make those connections, but we have to be more strategic in doing that, especially as we re-enter, opening things up hopefully this summer a little bit more for our high school kids, to encouraging them to come back. Sometimes you do have to do that with groups. Sometimes it's because they're very interested, whether it's phlebotomy, whether it's veterinary science. We have another group that's still very interested in social media and YouTube at the middle school. So we will continue to do that, but the team absolutely, one of the reasons I think we're pushing for the counseling center, and we're grateful for the counseling center at the high school, is just that. We can then run these opportunities with our mentors, hopefully in person, and bring more of these college programs. And we've shared Naviance down to the middle school. We were able to do that even through the pandemic. So the idea of, what do I want to be when I grow up is not starting at 11th grade. You may be visited 1,000 times between now and when you decide what you really want to be somewhere in your 20s, according to brain research. But we do have to get better at that. And this budget does allow for that. And it not only preserves the structures that are there, but absolutely increases the flexibility through the high school master schedule to do more what I would call independent pathways to college and career readiness, because we're going to have to think like that, because many of our students who wanted to go abroad or to a certain college are now coming back. We've had alumni who have reached back out. So we've developed our alumni pool to also help with that. And I can't lie, there's some sitting seniors who have taken our role of coaching our younger classmen who are also thinking about colleges. So the Family Engagement Center will hopefully play a more active role, in a different role, kind of whatever the pandemic isn't, but we won't be running the daycare, hopefully. So that will give us some free time to do that, and increase the mentorship program. So that's from the PPS side of things. It's going to be really important to build up the juniors and seniors specifically with relationship to their Naviance, to their college apps, and really hit that out of the park and support our families. Specifically, students with disabilities entering the college is stressful enough, but the pandemic has certainly spun that for many of our families, and we're working diligently with our case managers and our families on helping our students. You know, they may select to go to a local college and stay at home, but they're still going to go through the college application process for 1 year. I'm talking about transferring once they build up their stamina and encouraging them to continue their studies if that's what's appropriate for them to do. I don't. You want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, just to add, you know, what does it mean to be successful now in college or the workplace place post high school? That's why I talked about getting kids back to the opportunity to collaborate, communicate in new ways, given the current situation that we're in. You're going to see a lot more of an emphasis going forward, and we've been working on this already with internships, mentors, and community service. That's one of the biggest challenges that we've had this year, particularly with our high school kids, is providing those opportunities for them to have those hands-on in-person experiences through internships and mentorships. We actually just got an email this morning from our high school principal saying, hey, you know, what can we allow kids to do, because we really need to connect them with the workplace. Bringing people in who are professionals, we've been doing that for a long time. We're going to be doing that in a more systematic way, so that it's not just, you know, the person who knew the engineer that year who can come in and talk to the kids, but, you know, we're going to make sure that we have all of these professions coming in on a consistent basis. So it is going to be a challenge to get back to that, but, you know, what Dr. Tessick was talking about, providing that holistic support to kids with whatever they need postgraduate is definitely going to be a big part of this. This summer program that we're starting this summer is really going to continue throughout the entire year. And what we've been talking to our school leaders about is, don't think about what you're doing just this summer in isolation. Think about what this is going to look like September, October, all the way through next year, because the goal is by June 30th of 2022, we're not only back where we were, but we're further ahead, and that we're preparing kids for this new world. So I think we're in a good place, and I appreciate your question, because that's all we've been talking about as a team.
Can I, if I could jump in, you touched a little bit upon learners with varied disabilities, and that was my main concern, was that I didn't hear anything about students with IEPs, you know, and particularly in the lower grades, where we're looking at not just learning loss, but in many cases learning regression. And you know, the growing body of research that indicates that students with IEPs have just fallen so far behind this past year. You know, and I think about in the lower grades, particularly in those transition years, in second grade, you know, the last year before they go to Cottage Lane, in fifth grade, that year before they go to the middle school. And, you know, even the students in you know, even those who have that support in a co-teach class, you know, it's very difficult to transpire over Zoom in the hybrid model. And so I wonder how those needs are going to be addressed, in particular that significant regression, not just loss, but like serious regression. And then the second part of my question, not to jump ahead, but I wondered about in the Rescue Act money, what I think I heard was there was 20% of that grant money would be used or had to be used specifically for learning loss. And I was wondering if there was a specific number in that money that was earmarked for students with special needs.
So yeah, you can start with the last question first, and I'll
right.
wrap up.
So at least 20% has to be used for learning loss specifically. Then all of those other areas that I listed where the money could be used, there is flexibility, but clearly there could be overlap. So those monies are supposed to be addressing the needs of students with IEPs as well. less, but the 20% is at least. You could use more than that to address learning loss. 20% is just the minimum that you have to use.
And to go back to the students with disabilities, so absolutely, Dr. Sakanian, you are correct. So right there's the regulation parts of it, which requires our district to provide compensatory ed services, which is stated in kind of layman's terms within the act about meeting the needs of your homeless students, your IEP students, your English language learners. So they specifically targeted those groups. And that's why they said the minimum is 20%, because I think every district knows that we're going to be using more than 20%. I think what was advantageous for our district, and I say that with great pride and respect everybody sitting at the table and on Zoom, and to the parents of this district for their trust and hard work. We were one of the few districts in the state, let alone the county, that allowed our students with disabilities in-person learning every day from day one. So when you see the research that's coming out, many of these students that the research is based on, and certainly as someone who advocates for students with disabilities and on numerous levels, it became increasingly obvious, to your point, that those students were not able to really learn from Zoom. So yes, there are groups of students here within our district who, for whatever their personal reasons were, whether it was medical fragility or family or whatever reason, they had to remain 100% remote. We will absolutely be putting things into place over the summer, and we did last summer as well. So again, we were very fortunate last summer. We were able to provide related services in district to keep our kids moving forward, because we knew they got spun with the closing of our schools in the spring of last year. So we actually brought students in for speech, OT, PT, reading, and to Brian's point, we did, some things were virtual, but we were able to do some things in person, one-on-one with barriers through last summer. We will continue to build those opportunities, as to Brian's point, not just this summer, but throughout the whole school year. And the way that you need to do that for a student with disabilities, right, is to really individualize the support. So I think one of the key pieces of our plan, especially as we work to solidify the reentry plan, is how do we assess where students are and where they need to be and develop that individualized plan. We're running our annual review season now, and while that's definitely part of the process that's required, the next level of that is, while that may be the rule of thumb to develop the IEP, what we need is the educational plan in each of the key content areas of instructional core for each kid. And that will come out through their case managers. To your point about the transitions, we agree. This is going to be a hard enough year. Our little guys just came back into school full time, probably next week. So all of a sudden now I'm going to send you off right to the middle school. So one of the things we're talking about is now it is safe for us to send staff down to, many of our staff are vaccinated. We can send them down to the elementary schools. We've had multiple levels of articulation and data sharing already between our teams to make sure that we can literally wrap our arms around our students with disabilities, our homeless students, our ENL students, and really get a great sense as to where they are now, and in June, and in July, and in August, and then throughout every month next year, so we can individually plan for those students. And that's really for all of our students. I won't just say for those subgroups, but we're really doing that for all of our students. And I do believe a lot of the grant will be, by the time we get to the proposal, we've all talked about the amount of work we have out before us to do. And it is a lot, there's no doubt about it, but this team is committed to it, the staff and the building principals are committed to it, and we will make it work.
So I had a few questions and comments. The first one, back to transportation. I'm concerned that we might have, as we bring more of the students back into the classroom, and hopefully next year, we're 100%, everybody's back in the classroom, but we might still have pandemic type conditions. So we're not going to be able to crowd on the buses. So, is there any factor put into the transportation cost? Because now, instead of, I don't know the number, 100 buses, we may need 120 buses. in order to meet that criteria.
So I think, Cleo will go ahead and answer that, but before she does, I just want to say that, even if we are looking at sort of increases in funding, there's limited capacity in terms of the number of buses the contractors can actually provide. So realize that those contractors service the entire county. So the demand from all 8 districts, well, except for those who have their own buses, it's not. We could certainly consider adding funding, increasing funding, but at some point in time, we just don't have the buses, we just don't have the drivers. So that's a factor on the supply end. So even though the demand may necessarily increase, the problems we're finding even now are centered on getting drivers and getting buses. If it were only as easy as increasing, the amounts of funding available, but again, we're finding that there are constraints on the supply side of that. But go ahead.
And we do budget some additional routes just in case for those scenarios, but not too many. I think the just right amount of additional routes we do build into the budget in case that is a situation that occurs when the year starts. But again, we are sort of limited by what the bus companies can provide as well.
It's going to be an interesting scenario then next year. The staffing information, you had said it's primarily due to the scheduling and focused on the high school. So how many of those individuals are actually associated with which school? So is it, 90% of those lists were from the high school?
Great question. So I'll turn that over to Dr. Lloyd.
Yes.
Before we go down this road, can we make sure we talk about this generality without identifying any specific positions, please?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Jacobs. When we look at, I'm just going to go down the reductions based on planning enrollment and try to give some context to those positions. When we look at we received the resignation earlier this year, so we think we can make a move from the secondary level to the elementary level.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Lloyd. Can you speak up a little bit?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Ledger. Can you hear me better now? Okay, great. When we take a look at the art position, we received a resignation earlier this year. And what we're going to do is we're looking at the secondary level to make a move from art to secondary level and shift the person down to the elementary level. So it's not necessarily a reduction, it's a shift in staffing. When we take a look at English, at the secondary level, we do see that has a hard cut at the secondary level. The same for mathematics and the same for music, which are also both secondary positions. When we talk about physical education, we've had a retirement, right? A resignation for purposes of retirement. That's how we usually list it on the consent agenda in phys ed. And what we're looking to do there is to share staff between the high school and the middle school. In social studies as well, we're looking at cuts at the secondary level in general. So yes, generally we're looking at secondary movements. To answer your question.
So it sounds like all of these were associated with the high school then, and then you're shifting.
Yeah, it's about four cuts and generally 4 projected cuts and 2 through attrition.
Okay. The other kind of request is, that chart on slide 9 rather, it would be helpful to see prior years. I remember seeing slides where we would see the pie chart of the appropriations for proposed next year, but we would also see what they were in prior years. So I think that would be helpful for us to understand.
Yeah,
Same thing.
I apologize. That was was something we intended to put in, and for whatever reason, it just, given some of the issues associated, but that's a very important slide. We'll make sure we have that for our next budget workshop.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then the last, I'm sorry, go ahead.
A year-to-year comparison, and I know that Mr.
Yeah.
Henry had asked that last time, so again, I apologize. What we will do is, it's sort of we do look at the three-part component, and we list admin costs specifically as related to those components, admin, instructional, and capital. And we'll make sure we do a year-to-year on that, so.
Okay, all right, great. All right, thank you. And then the last thing is just really more of a watch out in that, we're getting the American Rescue Act funds this year, but we're not going to get it, every year from now on. So just to think about that as we're, doing budgets for this year, but for next year rather, but for subsequent years, we're not going to get 1.2 million every year from. So it's an anomaly. So just keep that in the back of your mind. That's.
We have, with the American Rescue, because it is through a grant application, we actually have until, I believe it's October of 2024 to use those funds. So they don't all have to be used within next year. They could be spread out over multiple years going forward.
And considering that that's a grant application, how long does it take to actually get the funds once you submit the grant application?
Well, if this year has been any indication, it has been a little slower than last year. Normally when the grant is received, it becomes under review. Once it is approved, so for example, this year, some of them took anywhere from 3 to 6 months, some of our federal grants, to be approved. Once approval goes through, assuming that they will be reimbursed in the same way, we get a 20% upfront payment of the grant amount, and then we can file as many throughout the year expense reports to ask for additional funds. You have a lot of flexibility there in terms of managing your cash flow with grants. So you can either file multiple FS25s during the year for payment. You can file 1 or 2 and then do your final payment. And then once the approval goes through, payment is pretty quick after that. We've just seen approvals have been a little slower this year than in previous years.
Are there any other board questions?
Just a comment. I guess, Dr. Pritchett, I think you made a statement that I said there was overstaffing, and I don't think that was entirely accurate. The percentage that was being quoted at the prior meeting was 70 or 72 or 75%. And I just brought it to everyone's attention that the number was over 80% and that there was a potential of overstaffing, but not definitively overstaffing. I guess the question I have to Dr. Kulat, you mentioned learning loss, and we all agree that it's there and it exists. How do we identify it, and then how do we remediate it?
Yeah, great question. There's a number of ways that we've already gone about identifying which students in the district have experienced learning loss, with the idea that every kid has in some respect, right? We have data teams that Dr. Tetrick talked about, starting with G.B. Parker's position as the data coordinator in central office, and we have data inquiry teams at the building level that have really been doing this work all along, even pre-pandemic. We have nationally normed assessments, state test data, as well as formative assessments that teachers are doing with their students. Formative assessments are typically the most telling to us because the kids and the teachers know each other best. So just to give you an example, at the high school level, they've already invited all of the kids in person who have not been doing well in the second and third marking period. To Dr. Teska's point, all the kids who have special needs, all the kids who are English language learners have all been afforded the opportunity to come in full time. So it's that kind of thinking going forward. Once we have the kids in front of us, it's a whole new ballgame. We've seen that just with in-person hybrid this year. We know this summer, all the program that we're planning is all in person for that reason, including the STEAM camp, because kids learn better when they're with us. So we have, I think, the expertise on our staff, and then getting that data into individual teachers' hands. You know, Dr. Despanian talked about the transition from one school to the next, the amount of articulation that we do as kids move from one class to the next, or one course to the next, or one teacher to the next. There's a lot of discussion that goes on about each individual student and what they need the following year, so that we can differentiate instruction to meet their individual needs based on those assessments. So, Karen, I don't know if you want to add anything further to that, but.
I would just add that this summer, in addition to the course offerings for students, of course, to address learning loss and to address the anxiety and everything we discussed already, another key component of that is curriculum realignment, if you might, or adjustment. Where we end with our students in June, really end with them, like compared to what we would have done in a normal year, is going to trigger a new way to open in the fall. So there is money built into this budget to support curriculum adjustment and or realignment, and to make really strategic decisions about, you know, where we know there is a learning gap and how to address those from day one, because that's going to be critically important to help students with disabilities and any of the other subgroups. And really any student, because if you come in the fall and you're already excited to be here, but still a little nervous, and then all of a sudden you, at any level, you start walking into a class and it's feeling like you can't do the work, or I don't know what I'm doing here. And that feeling of being overwhelmed is going to be critically important that we do not experience, that our students don't experience that. And so we've already had conversations with our staff about what does it look like to open next fall? You know, how do we do that? That is, it's strategically planning your curriculum and aligning it. A lot of what we call pre-teaching for special education students may be necessary, or E&L students in their support classes. And so there's really been, you know, really good conversations with principals and in my case, team leaders of special ed saying, so now what? Where do we go with that? Like IEPs aside, we know that there are students who didn't master every concept or skill set that they needed to this year. What do we do moving forward? And so using the data sets from Jeannie and from the core teachers for special education students and our homeless kids and our E&L students, those case managers of those students will be able to pre-teach that concept again to ensure success before they enter into that quote unquote mainstream environment where all the other kids seem to know. And we're flexible enough now with at the secondary level, and we've always been that way at the elementary, that if a student's feeling that way academically, we were always concerned about counseling at the high school, and we built this center, and that's why we're trying to almost mirror that in an academic center for them to really put the staff in one place and the students in one place and say, hey, I need help. You know, so that they don't go home and say to the parent, I'm done, I can't do this anymore, I'm so far behind. Last year, you know, they'll be able to literally walk through the door and just say, I need help with geometry. And we will have a way to establish that student with a connection to get the help that child needs. And that's going to be critical across K-12. And we're really working hard on that.
And I think the other big piece to add is that we want to make sure that our staff feel confident to address the learning loss. And so providing the type of training that they need, providing the time they need to collaborate with one another, to make sure that the instruction that they're delivering is meeting every single kid's need is key. So we don't want teachers to feel as though, you know, they don't have the resources that they need. And that's why, you know, this money that we're getting and that we're planning to use not only in the summer and throughout the course of next year is really welcome, because it provides us with an opportunity to get out ahead of this. We definitely have a very strong emphasis on using data to inform instruction. We always have, and we have the professionals in place to do than 3 months. We want to get the kids not only back to where they were, but make sure that we're even further along. Whether you're going into a calculus class and you missed pre-calc this year, or you need some help with that, or going back to Kara's point about, our youngest learners being able to meet with success in the next grade or a unit study. So we're really thinking a lot about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Before I invoke the 10-second rule, can I ask a question of the board? Are there any other, I know I've been keeping a list of some of the broader categorical items that, you would like us to provide you with some more information on. To include some year-to-year comparisons in terms of expenditures specifically. Are there any topics or as we go forward that you would like us as a cabinet to consider prior to our next workshop? For example, we didn't get too much into Jack's area this evening as it relates to, let's say, perhaps reserve strategy. I know we did talk a little bit about some of the capital project work that we've got slated for 2022 and in some recent workshops. That all that is built into our current spending plan for next year. But again, if there are any other aspects of the spending plan that you would like more additional information on, certainly we're eager to provide you with that information prior to you adopting this budget. Because again, we want to make sure that you're comfortable and satisfied with the work that we've done.
I would question, like in the past, we've had a presentation from the facilities department, like you suggested, in terms of what work this budget addresses in terms of, maintenance issues, and what work is addressed in terms of, rehabilitation or, restoration, replacement type projects. And then we've also had some discussions about, athletics in terms of what the athletic program is going to look like, whether there's going to be any new teams added, how's, the proposed reopening of school going to affect the athletic season next year in terms of, budgetary constraints. Are we going to need, more athletic buses for transportation? We're going to need more facilities support for, the athletic programs, and then also the extracurricular programs, getting them back, by getting the extracurricular programs back with regard to in-person occurrences. Are there going to be additional costs that we need to address with regard to additional cleaning or additional staffing requirements? I don't know, but in terms of bringing everybody back in this, quote unquote new world, all the programs need to be addressed, in addition to just the curriculum and learning. I mean, what we heard tonight, in terms of student support and the curriculum and so forth. But again, as part of the educational process, it's a holistic process, right? Everybody gets a little bit different, a different education from different programs, and certain programs mean more to other people in terms of their takeaway than the traditional learning that we have. So I just question, whether it pays to address some of those other, components of the educational process.
So Mr. Jacobs, in years past, the manner in which we addressed, as you've suggested, we've actually, if you can remember, not even last year, because last year we were entering into the pandemic, but the years prior, we convened our admin council in the library, and we did just that. We actually had a draft of the budget, a complete line by line of the budget, where we were able to look at those expenditures, the year to year, exceptions, and having those department heads or principals or building level staff or cabinet level staff to basically answer those questions in real time in person. But we weren't able to do that last year. I'm wondering if we could facilitate that, even vis-a-vis Zoom, perhaps at our next workshop, and work out a structure to make that happen. I think we probably could.
Do a similar format to tonight,
Yeah.
the budget, and pull out those areas if there's any adjustments in ours, so we'll add those areas here.
Yeah, so I think we wanted, I think it would be really helpful to be able to kind of bring that aspect of our South Orangetown budget development process back to life again, to resuscitate that. But this evening, we really felt that it was important. We did hear you as a board say that, we really wanted to start with this sort of this idea that we wanted to connect in a broader sense, connecting the spending plan to the strategic outcomes. So we figured tonight really that was going to be our emphasis. We hope we did accomplish that to some degree. But I think if we want to, if what I'm hearing from the board is to continue this discussion at a more refined level, with an actual draft of the budget for your review, your consideration, well in advance of the next workshop. I know that we actually have a draft that we're ready to show you, and you've seen an iteration of that already. So, and again, this is really Mr. Arundella's first night of presenting the budget, this particular budget. So, and I think she did a tremendous job tonight. So I want to say thank you to her. But again, we'll be sure to get you the most recent, most revised copy of this year's proposed budget in anticipation of our next budget workshop, where we can go through it in greater detail and answer the questions such as extracurricular athletic programming, and again, what those facilities expenditures and all those examples that you just mentioned, plus whatever else we would want to discuss with those building level leaders or those department level leaders as it relates to their what they see as their key concepts and key aspects of their spending plan going forward as well, so the board can have that conversation. So we'll set that up for next time. I believe that our next date is what is it? I probably said 13th, right? So that's actually that's next week.
I can share the line by line draft budget that has been summarized on these slides. Just knowing that we are still, it is still in draft form. There might still be some movement there. Does it sound reasonable? Great.
Yeah, the other thing that I would say is that as we had the discussions tonight about how this budget aligns with our strategic plan, once the budget's adopted, the next challenge is determining our goals and our, benchmarks in terms of how we're going to measure our achievements. So, while it's fresh in everybody's mind in terms of what was discussed tonight, you may want to start drafting some of those, benchmarks or goals that we can use to evaluate what we've spoken about and what we're trying to achieve from this budget.
So that's where I believe our esteemed colleague, Jeannie Corcoran comes in. Because I know that's been a very big part of her area of responsibility as it relates to tracking those key performance indicators. So I think we would, we have a system in place. But again, I think we want to refine that and again, continue to, ensure that those key performance indicators are still, relevant to what it is we're trying to do. So George and I will connect just to make sure that we're continuing, that Jeannie is continuing to do that work for us as it relates to, accountability.
Jeannie's actually been working closely with Dr. Coulon, Dr. Tessick, and the building principals, actually looking at the various SI indicators and the data over this past year. It's really been able to help inform our student support services. So that team has really been reaching out based upon a lot of the data that Jeannie has been working with and has been able to provide to our buildings.
But we'll highlight those, at our next workshop as well. And again, if we have time, again, we still have a few more workshops ahead of us. But again, we'll put that in the parking lot to make sure that we don't forget about that as it relates to accountability and making sure that we're on track with our goals and objectives and strategic plan. But what we'll do is we'll arrange, and again, it's a bit of I know that we're sort of trying to figure out what the right format is within the context of our ability to meet in person, but we should be able to provide again a more detailed analysis of this draft of this budget when we meet again on the 13th, and is it unreasonable to say that we would get this? I mean, I think maybe by tomorrow. Was that the line by line? I think it's already done.
It's done. Yeah.
It's just getting it to you.
It's, yeah, absolutely. The board report. The board report. Happy to happen. Those are the files that we get. So we try to import them.
Yeah, I remember there was a process that we went through where we had the big the binder, and we had a board member who would put, God bless her, she would put the Post-it notes, and we'd have dozens of Post-it notes. I'm not so sure that I don't want to speak for you, but
I don't believe.
You're muted, Lonnie.
Trying to unmute. There we go. I don't believe we want to do that line by line analysis. I think we just want to make sure that understanding the different environment we're going to be in, hopefully in September when we reopen, that the typical budgetary allotments for these other programs may not be sufficient because we're not in our traditional opening, right? Different parameters will exist and will affect the various programs in different ways, and we just want to make sure that we're addressing the entire educational process, not just the classroom environment. So that's why I asked the question I asked in terms of looking at these other programs. The purpose wasn't to drill down line by line to all these other programs. It was more to make sure that the board was comfortable with that. The other programs were addressed and looked at as well.
So let me suggest this then, Mr. LaMadrid, when we would have those discussions in the past with our building level leadership or department level leadership, he would ask the question, what doesn't this budget do? Sort of an inverted, tonight we're telling you all the things it's going to do as it relates to, hitting our targets with our strategic plan. But the question we have historically asked of our building level and our department level leadership is, what what did you want to do that we didn't get to do? I think that's a really important conversation to have with those folks. I think we're going to try to attempt to organize that conversation again, because I think it's a very practical and worthwhile discussion. And I do think it does help to guide the way forward in terms of getting to this finalized or adopted budget. So we're going to put that together, and we'll have more details for you tomorrow in tomorrow's board report as to what that's going to look like on the 13th.
And I guess my comment is more is like, what are the nuances that the budget's addressing with regard to these additional programs that we need to do in order to run them? Is that a better way to phrase what I'm looking for?
Right, so when, in building the budget and part of it, so I know we all met yesterday, Cleo, Brad, so we'll talk about extracurricular. So each principal, part of the budget process, each principal submitting their extracurricular plans to Cleo and going through those, and then cabinet views those. And that goes through Brian's office if it's extracurricular and it's at a certain place, or the principal does. That's all procedural in nature. And to your point, because of the pandemic, we didn't really seek to add new clubs at the middle school. The kids really weren't coming to the offices and banging down the doors and saying, we want to run a Quidditch club, right? So part of it is trying to just take back what we currently do offer and make sure we run it effectively. But what's the impact of that? I think you said cleaning, staffing.
Correct.
We have to have other groups. And so that was considered, but I think we need to, what I hear you saying is that in order for the board to feel comfortable, we need to be able to present that conversation to you. So for athletics, as the example, there has been multiple conversations about athletics and cleaning, and from even the nursing protocols for playing up, because that keeps changing with the state requirements, and it still may change again before fall. So those conversations have happened. I think we just need to bring them to light at the next budget workshop, so that the board is absolutely in the know about that they were considered, that it was represented in this budget. Absolutely. And yeah,
Right, because those
All right.
conversations,
You understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Are there any other board questions or comments? So we're comfortable now until we see more material and we reconvene next Tuesday. Okay. I greatly appreciate everybody's effort in terms of working on this budget and trying to get this budget, wrapped up, and looking to how we can provide the best education we can within the financial constraints we have to deal with. That being said, I guess we can say goodnight.
Yeah, on behalf of the admin team, we want to say thank you for your time tonight. I know we went a little bit late, but yeah, a very important conversation, and I think we'll be better prepared to again take the next few steps when we meet again next week, and we'll have more for you tomorrow. So thank you as well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
good, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Have a
Good
good
night.
evening.